Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another episode of Total Breakdown. In this episode, we've got a battle submitted by Sir Tarkin as he plays the dwarves fighting the Empire played by DMT Monkey. It is quite a long battle and it is very interesting, and I think there's a lot to learn from it. Before we jump into it though, let's take a look at the army composition. First off, on the dwarf side, we've got a Lord, 6 units of miners, 4 units of longbeards with great weapons, 2 quarrelers, 2 thunderers, 2 cannons, and 2 gyrocopters with brimstone guns. You'll notice also that one of these longbeards is up to rank 4 and another one is up to rank 1. The Empire, meanwhile, again played by DMT Monkey, has Balthazar Gelt, a warrior priest, 3 spearmen with shields, 3 great swords, 2 crossbowmen, 2 handgunners, 2 Reiksguard, and 2 great cannons. However, none of these units have been ranked up, and that's going to cause a little bit of an issue. Alright, we're going to go into slow motion right away because there's quite a bit to go over, as you can maybe already tell. So first things first, Sir Tarkin's got a good defensive position here. He's on the top of a hill, and he's got his longbeards, artillery, and range units set up here, and the Lord is chilling back here waiting for his defensive role to kick in. Meanwhile, we've got 2 units of gyrocopters on either side going in to harass the Empire enemy, and we've got a lot of miners taking advantage of Vanguard deployment, which is going to make this battle very interesting. We've got these guys going from here, 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 and here, and it's going to force DMT Monkey to spread out his troops, break his stationary position, and move out in all of these directions. Now, of course, he could have just held the line, stayed put, and fended off these miners because they're pretty weak units, but maybe it's because of impatience or something else that was going on. DMT Monkey decides that he's not going to just sit back and instead will charge in, and you'll see that happen as we go along. Now, in terms of composition, I have to say it would have been extremely helpful for the dwarves to have a runesmith. Meanwhile, on the Empire side, Reiksguard, great call, good to have some cavalry in there. Your mobility outdoes the dwarves at all times, so take advantage of that. Gelt on a flying mount. Decent idea. There is going to be a lot of range here, though, so just need to make sure you keep Balthazar out of that, and you'll see that doesn't really happen. Big problem here are these spearmen with shields. There's a long line of them, and they're all going to be pretty pointless. Spearmen with shields are not good against swords and axes. Spearmen in general aren't good against swords and axes. And so these guys over here are going to be largely useless. Not only are they not armor-piercing, they're better against large units, which the dwarves don't have, and instead you should have had more great swords, because these guys are going to do well against the dwarves. They're anti-infantry, they're armor-piercing, and they're very strong. They pack a punch. More of these guys would have been a great idea. Then, of course, we've got another unit of Reiksguard, as discussed, and handgunners and crossbowmen. Once again, as with the spearmen, the crossbowmen were a bad idea, because crossbows are not armor-piercing, but handgunners are. So all these crossbowmen are not going to be causing as much damage as these handgunners, though they will have longer range. What that boils down to is, in my opinion, sort of a mispick when it comes to army composition. Now you'll see already these handgunners are opening fire into the miners. Quite a bit's going on here. So these miners are taking shots. It would have been a good idea for Sir Tarkin to pull them back right away, because this unit of great swords has already been baited in, and it would be great to just keep baiting them outwards and keep these guys alive and away from range fire. Meanwhile, these gyrocopters, as you'll see in just a bit, these range units are able to come in and open fire. There's no reason for the gyrocopters to be here. Instead, they should be here, and these miners should maybe take a more defensive stance at the top of this very small hill, because they've done a good job. They've baited the Reiksguard in, but it's just a matter of now holding the line. They don't have, the best charge defense or anything, so not going to make much of a difference, but it'd be nice to at least let them brace. And meanwhile, again, the gyrocopters are currently taking fire. They should have been over here instead, where they'd have range in this area, and they'd be able to open fire at the Reiksguard as they came in and ping-pong back and forth for hit-and-run tactics. On this other side, we've also got the Reiksguard coming in this way, and these guys, these gyrocopters, are they're moving, but they could have stayed stationary where they are right now and opened fire on these Reiksguard as they moved in towards these miners. But that's not the biggest problem. There will be more issues in micromanagement as we go along. Right now, the biggest issue is this engagement here and this engagement here. Miners are not going to have a good time against greatswords. This was a bad move. The ideal way to play this, because it started off great, don't get me wrong, Sir Tarkin, great thinking, I love this idea of baiting the Empire and tearing his formation up. Unfortunately, this is not a good matchup. Miners don't stand a chance. They should have kept pulling back. Ideally, if DMT Monkey wasn't paying attention, you may have picked that unit of greatswords off with your Thunderers. We'll never know, of course, but keeping them there, letting them engage, not a good call. Also, these gyrocopters are still here. They really should have moved here by now. They're taking not too much damage because they are being fired on by just crossbows and they have armor, but it's going to cause trouble down the line. Meanwhile, Empire player here, DMT Monkey, a little bit too stationary. It's quite clear that the dwarves have taken a defensive position. It is time to push forward. Don't let them pick off your units. Don't let them damage your Reiksguard cavalry and engage even slightly with your units. Why do that? There's nothing to be gained by keeping this defensive position here. Move forward. Now over here we've got the Reiksguard going in. Again, these gyrocopters, still not opening fire. So that's a lot of time wasted where some damage could have been done. But instead, these Reiksguard get to charge in with full force in these miners, cause some severe damage, and only then do the gyrocopters open fire. So, again, just a little bit of mismicro there. Now these miners here taking fire from these handgunners, and the cannons, the dwarven cannons, have opened fire, letting loose onto the Empire position. Early on, they were targeting the enemy cannons, like the dwarven cannons were targeting the Empire cannons. I get what you're trying there, to kill them off nice and early, but it's not going to happen. They're too small a target. You're better off attacking the great swords because they are the primary threat to dwarves in this composition. Now, what have we got going on here? These miners, they took this sort of defensive stance here. Gyrocopters finally have been moved to a better position, away from the ranged units, but you'll see very soon, still in range very quickly, because all they had to do was move forward a little bit. They're in range, and now once again the gyrocopters are going to take fire. They could have been just a little bit farther off, or further down here, or further this way, and kept firing at the Reiksguard. The thinking here is great, it's just the micromanagement that's a little off. Meanwhile, having 3 units of miners here taking this charge from the Reiksguard, not the best play for obvious reasons. Instead, this unit of miners here, what they could have done is circled around and engaged with the cannons here. Or with the cannons here, because these guys are getting quite a bit of damage in. 28 and 16 kills. It doesn't sound like too much, but it is a fair number. It does come into play. Meanwhile, the dwarven cannons are doing a great job as well. They've got 26 and 31 kills at the moment. That's 11 minutes left on this replay. Now what have we got going on here? These Reiksguard units have decided to either bait the gyrocopters, which they've done quite successfully, or they're simply hit and run. No, they tried to bait the gyrocopters. They did a decent job of that. And meanwhile, on this side as well, these gyrocopters not being microed well enough. They need to be pulled further away from the range fire and engaging the cavalry. These guys, I'm guessing they weren't in guard mode, so they gave chase to the cavalry when they started running off. Again, just that micro problem. Should have pushed them in to engage, or rolled them around to engage here. Just occupy the great cannons. We've got one that's got 40 kills right now. If it had been kept occupied by one of these miners, like it looks like that's what's happening right now, if these miners had kept them occupied, that number would be a lot smaller, I guarantee you. Now, you'll also notice these Reiksguard units, they just pulled out and they're sitting there now. Meanwhile, these handgunners are opening fire on the miners, and these gyrocopters are just sitting there looking pretty. They haven't got any, how many kills have they got? 4 kills on them right now. They need to swing in and engage these Reiksguard units. Because you'll see these gyrocopters, which clearly were getting more attention, are currently already up at 9 kills. But beyond that, look at the HP damage and the morale damage they've done. That is key. It's not all about kills. It does boil down to HP damage and morale damage as well, especially when you're dealing with cavalry as the dwarves. Now these Reiksguard units are coming in to engage these miners. What I think they should have done instead is rolled in and engaged this artillery, because they are up at 46 and 47 kills. You let them be, and that number is just going to keep going higher. We see some hounds go down, targeting the Longbeards, doing a little bit of damage there. Again, not the most powerful spell, so I don't agree with with casting that. And you'll also see now Balthazar is caught in a crossfire from Thunderers as well as Quarrelers, finally running away, but very low on morale, and took a decent amount of damage to his HP as well. Again, the Reiksguard sort of circling around these miners need to come in here and engage this artillery, this pair of artillery units. Let's go back here, see what's going on. So the Reiksguard here have finally given up, what with the morale damage caused by the gyrocopters. Miners, very weak units, were able to sort of seal the deal here, but again, I still think they should have gone in. What we're seeing here, though, is these miners have been pulled in here to engage these cannons. What I would have liked to see is these miners instead pulled away from this rather pointless, I'd like to say, conflict. They should have been pulled away and engaging here, and these miners should have been engaging here. Now, what's happened here is DMT Monkey has been torn apart so hard that his range units are on either side. That's why miners, units that should never make it to your center, have made it to your center. If the gunners had stayed put in this general area, these miners would be dead right now. They'd be retreating or dead. But instead, we've got the handgunners there engaging in melee, and the crossbowmen here trying to fend off the gyrocopters. Let's go back to normal speed here. Again, it's a very long battle. You can tell the time on this video is quite long. It's a very interesting battle, though. Now, again, here, these handgunners are opening fire on these gyrocopters, and while the gyrocopters are used, efficiently to help attack the Reiksguard units, you really need to pay attention to where they go, because you'll see in just a little bit, these handgunners are going to open fire on the gyrocopters, and they're going to go down very quickly. You should have pulled them back here. That way you can open fire on these Reiksguard units without taking fire yourself. And you'll see again over here as well, these miners have been engaged by the greatswords. It's a little bit more attention to the micromanagement, and you'll see as well these gyrocopters are going down, surrendering on the fight. These miners have given up. It's all about that micromanagement here. Let's pull out a little bit, and on this side as well, you'll see these gyrocopters are now finally disengaging, pulling away from all this arrow fire, which is good play. They were taking a little bit too much damage. Thankfully, it's just crossbows. If they had been handgunners, which they should have been, those gyrocopters would not be faring so well right now. Still exchanging fire from a distance here. These cannons are up at 49, these are up at 52. Again, if that Reiksguard unit had come in, it was first idle 2 minutes ago when these units were at 40, roughly 40 or 30 kills. That Reiksguard unit should have come in, and even now, sitting idle, should come in and engage these units. Let's see what's going on here. Speed it up a little bit. Once again, the Empire player, DMT Monkey, just taking too much time with the advance. He has moved forward piecemeal, just allowing the Dwarven artillery to keep firing in. Not a good idea. You know it's the Dwarves. You know they've taken a defensive position. Don't spend time under artillery fire. And now it feels like Sir Tarkin assumed a quicker advance than is actually happening, so he pulled his range units up front, but now they're sitting idle until these units come into range. You'll notice, though, and this to me is one of the most interesting aspects of this battle, if you look across the Empire army, a large portion of the army is exhausted or tired or in other way affected by fatigue. They're running lower on ammunition than they would have been had it been a regular engagement, but because Sir Tarkin sent those dwarves out forward and DMT Monkey was pulled into engaging, a lot of these spearmen who are already going to fare weakly, and these handgunners and these range units just overall are tired, and that's going to affect them terribly. They're going to do even worse than usual. They're just not going to have a good time against the dwarves. The fatigue is a very important factor in Total War battles. You want to make sure that your units are energized, otherwise you will see problems with charge bonus, melee attack, melee defense, armor even takes a hit when your units are tired. So you need to be a lot more careful about managing fatigue and not running them around all the time. Let's see what the situation is here right now. 68 kills on this cannon, 64 kills on this cannon. Sitting idle has not helped DMT Monkey at all. Neither has the Reiksguard that's only now coming in to engage the Dwarven range units and artillery. Also, poor cast there. Plague of Rust on a unit of Quarrelers is a waste of mana. That Plague of Rust could have been saved for use later. And again, we've got Transmutation of Lead going down. Negative 22% weapon damage and minus 34 melee attack on Thunderers and Quarrelers is a waste of mana. That would have been much more helpful had it been dropped on some Longbeards when the melee engagement began. But instead, that's a lot of mana, once again, wasted on units that really stood no chance in a melee battle anyway. And I don't know if that was another Transmutation of Lead or the same one. But yeah, just poor casting there. Bad use of magic. Now, as this engagement starts here... Now, let's slow it down a bit, actually. So, we've got quite a bit going on. These units of gyrocopters, they're standing steady there. If these were handgunners, they're not. They're crossbowmen. Even still, they should be engaging these gyrocopters, trying to take them out of the picture. They should have been handgunners that would have made quick work. You'll see their health and morale earlier was a lot lower. They're running low on ammunition as well. Really, these guys should be further back here, away from any potential fire, because they are very close to dying. And a couple of volleys from some handgunners would take care of them. But the thinking, again, is good. Target the Reiksguard, but follow them. Stay away from enemy range units, and their Flying Lord especially. Now, back to this engagement here. As I mentioned, I think right at the beginning of the battle, the dwarves could have done quite well if they had a runesmith. Now, when it comes to great swords, they're probably your best pick when you're fighting against dwarves beyond cavalry. They're armor-piercing, and they're anti-infantry. Longbeards are armor-piercing, and they're armored, which is great. Stats-wise, these guys are pretty well balanced. The Longbeards do look like they're better off. However, that anti-infantry stat makes a big difference, and you're going to see, especially with this added Plague of Rust being cast, this is a good cast, by the way. Good job dropping the armor on these guys by negative 15. That's the strength of the dwarves, their armor, and that's been stripped away from them. So that's a good cast, and you're going to see that flank very quickly fall apart for the dwarves there. Now you've got the warrior priest getting involved here, Gelt still floating around providing support through magic. Meanwhile, the dwarven lord, Sir Tarkin has left him behind up until right this instant. That was a bit of a mistake. You've got a lord here who's a melee expert. You want him in the fight, supporting from up front, not from behind. Can't be casting magic with a melee expert. So now we've got the again, a little bit of waste of mana there. While these spells look impressive, these area of effect spells, they look impressive, they're not all that effective. You're much better off sticking to, for example, Plague of Rust or Transmutation of Lead when it comes to battling the dwarves, and if you've got Balthazar Gelt on your side. See another more wasted mana there. Now, let's see what's going on here. So as I said, the great swords were able to quite healthily defeat the Longbeards. That anti-infantry extra is nice and helpful. What would have been a good idea on Sir Tarkin's part is to move the range units, either move them further in so they could have opened fire into the enemy melee units. Right now they should be pulling back, but they're not. The other thing they could have done is open fire on Gelt. He's a very easy target right now, flying up in the air. A couple of rounds from some Thunderers would probably have picked him off, but instead he was left free to engage these gyrocopters and quickly cap them off. Again, if Gelt had fallen a little bit earlier and hadn't been able to cast these spells and just overall caused some issues with morale because of his death, this battle could have ended a lot sooner. Instead, he's allowed to stay alive for quite a bit longer. And let's see what's going on here. We've got these... Again, these Thunderers here a little bit too far. Should have moved them in to get a better angle into the backs of these guys, or even better, to open fire on these crossbowmen and have them retreat. Again, a mass rout can be extremely helpful. You don't always have to kill the enemy. You can scare them off as well. Finally, we've got Balthazar Gelt under fire here from the Quarrelers. And this is really when it becomes pretty conclusive. The Empire is losing. And that is exactly how this battle ends, though these great swords do get a decent number of kills before all said and done. Overall, I have to say, really clever play by Sir Tarkin. I really, really enjoyed this battle, seeing that Vanguard deployment nice and early, sort of baiting the Empire player out, baiting DMT Monkey out, tiring his troops, causing them more struggle later on in the battle than they had to go through. Really, really clever play. However, it's this Miss Micro that is costing so many lives. You've got these miners sitting here for the longest time. I think they've been sitting here for so long that they got their all their fatigue, their vigor has recovered. So that's really telling you something. It's all about keeping your units moving, keeping them active. And I understand, again, it gets really difficult when you're micromanaging so many things from so many sides. Very clever play. I loved it. Great thinking. But a little bit more attention to your key units. What I mean by that, and this applies to the Empire player as well, when you're looking at such a large engagement, close to 20 units, and if you're playing an even larger battle with 40, you really want to pay attention to your key units. For the Empire player, it was like the Reichsguard, or the Great Swords, or Balthazar Gelt. For the dwarves, Sotarkin, it was your gyrocopter bombers, and in the initial sort of section of the battle, let's call it, your miners. A lot more attention should have been paid to moving the gyrocopters around, making sure they were constantly engaged, out of enemy ranged fire. It really boils down to thinking about, again, your key units versus the enemy key units in any given situation. When it's your gyrocopter bombers, the enemy key units in that play are their ranged units and their cavalry. Don't look at anything else. Don't look at the swordsmen, don't look at the artillery. Look at where the enemy ranged units are, look at where the cavalry is, make sure your key units, in this case again, those miners and the gyrocopter bombers, are doing what's absolutely necessary. Then, once that's taken care of, look at the auxiliary units. There were those cannons that were left unattended, and you had a lot of miners preoccupied with less important battles, let's call them, less important engagements. So what you should have done is pull the miners out and engage the artillery units, because again, that's another key unit when you're having this initial phase, let's call it a skirmish at the beginning of the battle. Now, at the end here, we've got some of these units, again, they're still trying to put up a fight, but very quickly they're going to fall to much better, much more elite units. When your when all your buddies are wavering and surrendering, like you've got going on here, you don't stand a chance. It's sort of like the equivalent of saying GG. These guys are just giving up right now. But again, I think a Runesmith would have gone a long way for Sotarkin. We've got some really impressive plays overall, though. Let's just take a quick look at what's going on. Again, these spearmen, they did a decent job, but if they were great swords instead, they probably would have done a lot better. I understand using spearmen with shields to try and thwart some of the damage coming in from the most likely ranged fire that the dwarves are going to be fielding. However, that anti-armor is a lot more important. You want to be able to counter dwarven armor, which, for example, Gelt helps do. Now, again, overall, decent play. We've got actually quite a few units that have ranked up over the course of this battle. Both dwarven cannons were able to rank up. 102 and 86 kills. That is madness. One of these Reichsguard units should have come in a lot sooner and engaged the artillery. Even if it doesn't finish them off, if it gets them to rout for a little bit, if it breaks them, even just for, a minute or two, that makes all the difference in the world, because these 102 kills and 86 kills makes a big difference. It's almost 200 people dead before an engagement even starts. With that said, you'll also see these Longbeards have done a great job just absolutely slaughtering enemy units. Meanwhile, the miners, they were more sort of a fodder unit, and they've done well. I can only assume that this unit here was engaged on the right flank where the cavalry was being attacked by the gyrocopter bombers, these gyrocopters. So, again, decent use of an otherwise pretty weak unit. On the Empire side, we've got some great use of the Great Swords. A lot of killing going on here, and that's why I feel like these spearmen with shields should have been replaced with more Great Swords. Overall, decent composition. Reichsguard, good pick. Decent shot cavalry. Crossbowmen should have been gunners instead. Funnily enough, the crossbowmen actually have more kills here than the handgunners, but that's only because of Miss Micro. If the handgunners were microed better and the crossbows were handgunners instead, you guaranteed you see a lot more kills. A lot more of these Longbeards, for example, would be dead before they could even engage, and these numbers, these enemy troops killed for the Longbeards, would be a lot lower as well. Again, overall, I thought this battle was fascinating, for lack of a better word. I love the use of Vanguard deployment. It was very clever use of baiting your enemy and literally tearing apart their otherwise decent formation. The only problem sort of arose when the micromanagement was a little bit off. Again, this is for Sir Tarkin. The micromanagement was a little bit off if you paid a little bit more attention, again, to key units. When it's your gyrocopter bombers, that initial phase of the battle, it's your bombers, or sorry, your gyrocopters and your miners, and you need to focus on the enemy cavalry and the enemy range units, because those are the things that A, you're targeting, or B, you're trying to run away from. If there was more attention paid there, those gyrocopters would have both lasted a lot longer and would have done a lot more damage, especially later on in the battle. On the flip side, for the Empire, DMT Monkey, you spent too much time standing back. Right at the beginning of the battle, it was very clear that the dwarves had a strong defensive position. They were not going to let it go, and why should they? That's sort of the dwarves' strong suit. You should have pushed forward a lot sooner, because the enemy artillery got a lot of kills, which they wouldn't have had you pushed forward earlier. Also, when it comes to chasing down enemy gyrocopters, try to reverse bait them. They are trying to tear you apart. That's the idea behind gyrocopters in that position. Don't fall for it, because if you fall for it, you open yourself up. Had Sir Tarkin actually pushed forward with his long beards and range units, this battle could have been a lot quicker once the Empire army was out of position. But with that said, Sir Tarkin had a good defensive position. There's no reason to give it up. Baiting the Empire was a great move. I loved watching it go down. Hopefully you guys did as well. And of course, as I said before, the idea here is we've got a collaborative learning experience. So if any of you guys have seen something or noticed something in this battle that I simply missed, please do point it out. I thought it was quite fascinating. Fairly long battle, which isn't very common in Total War Warhammer. If you'd like to see more Total War content, please do subscribe to this channel. And of course, as always, I'm looking for feedback from myself as well. If there's some way I can improve this segment, do let me know. We're still in its nascent stages. And of course, keep submitting your battles. I'm loving all these submissions I'm getting, working my way through them. Keep adding to the pile. Love watching them, love casting them. And as I get more free time, you can rest assured I'll be covering more of them and trying to get all these tips out there. Apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.